What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're checking out no speed limits in Germany, why the US doesn't have an Autobahn. First thought, we don't know how to drive. You guys have way better driving skills than we do as Americans. I know that because I've taken, not a German driving test, but I have taken a European driving test, which I did. Which one did I do? Did I do Denmark's? And I was completely blown away. I was like, the amount of signage and education that you guys have to go through to be able to just get your license makes sense that you have some highways that you're able to drive extremely fast on because you guys are just more responsible drivers than Americans are. The average American, at least. All right, so this one's from CNBC, into the Autobahn, Germany. I'm pumped for it. Curious to see what we're in store for. Smash like button. Let's dive in.
Audi, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Porsche. These cars have made Germany famous for automotive engineering.
Amazing cars.
And they are fast and...
I just got to say it. I think Germans make some of the best cars. Germans and the Japanese. Is it Japanese? Yeah. Japanese make Toyota. Yeah, it's Japanese. And Lexus, BMW, amazing
powerful
cars.
Enough for these equally famous German roads, which are unlike any other in the world. The Autobahn, a national highway system with no top speed limit. If you love cars, chances are driving the Autobahn as fast as you can is one of the things you want to do before you die.
Being able to actually put your vehicle to the test and really show its full potential is the ultimate.
Everything about the Autobahn owes a lot to Germany's unique and difficult history.
So there's this kind of bizarre Cold War moment when German lawmakers argue that being a free citizen, somebody who is not living in a totalitarian dictatorship, has to be able to drive as fast as they want.
So why doesn't the US or any other country in the world have an Autobahn? And is it really all it's cracked up to be?
It's a cool topic.
First things first, what is the Autobahn? The full name is actually Bundesautobahn, which simply means federal highway. It is a more than 8,000-mile system of limited access freeways that run all throughout Germany. The word Autobahn is often just translated as motorway.
I'm going to make a guess. Okay, so I didn't see the little part here at the very bottom. There are some areas of the Autobahn where there are speed limits, though. I think I remember hearing that in one of the videos that we watched a couple of months ago. Also, growing up as like an American, when I thought of the Autobahn, I always just thought it was like one highway, like one that went from, you know, whatever, one area, Berlin to Hamburg. I thought it was just like one stretch of road that you were able to drive fast on. I didn't know that it actually was in reference to like the entire highway system.
In simple design terms, it's quite similar to freeways in the United States. Limited access means cars and trucks only. No pedestrians, no bicycles, no skateboards, nothing other than cars. There are designated entry and exit points and no stoplights or intersections. The roots of the Autobahn go back all the way to the early 20th century, but really the first big step in its growth happened under Adolf Hitler. There really was no need for it at all. Few Germans owned cars. Most took public transit, which was plenty fast and got people to where they needed to go. The Autobahn's real potential was as propaganda.
They want to build a sort of a futuristic mega project. Something that would lend itself to, you know, talking about the regime as a modern, forward-looking regime. At the same time, while it was, politically speaking, a very repressive, totalitarian dictatorship, right? It was about symbolizing power, the conquest of space.
By the end of World War II, there were less than 4,000 kilometers built, about 2,500 miles.
Okay.
It was really from the 1960s through the 80s.
I watched, by the way, before we hop a little bit farther forward, the other day I watched one of those videos where they recreate old footage, and it was of Nazi Germany, but like the way that they did it, it was all colorized, and then I don't know if they use AI or something to kind of just improve it and make it look a little bit more realistic. It was pretty wild though. It was only a couple of minutes long. I thought about doing a reaction to it, but it was so short that I was like, I was gonna check this out myself. But historically, like seeing that far back, like real footage, was pretty mind-blowing.
That the Autobahn system we know today was properly developed.
This was obviously a time when the Federal Republic
Slugbug.
became sort of an affluent Western liberal democracy and also much more of a consumer society. So people actually began to own cars in much higher numbers.
The post-World War II.
I gotta just explain it to you guys really quick. So we have a thing here in the States when you see one of these, the Volkswagen, we call them a Volkswagen bug. When you see a bug and you're with someone, you can punch them and you say slug bug. And it's basically like just a way to play around, usually with kids. But you can joke around and punch someone if you see one and you say slug bug. First person that sees it gets to hit the other person. I don't know. It was a fun little joke. I doubt that you guys do that.
Era is also when the Autobahn gained its most famous trait: long stretches with no speed limits. During the Nazi era, the speed limits were mainly to conserve fuel for the war effort.
The birth of a new free nation for Germany.
Once West Germany became independent and separate from the Communist East in 1949, it kept the Nazi-era speed limits for a few years. But then,
in a really astonishing move, the Federal Parliament in 1952 decides to abolish all speed limits, not just on the Autobahn, but on any kind of highway and in urban areas as well. And you can
That's
imagine the
wild.
results, especially in cities, right? With cars going as fast as they want.
crashes, injuries, and fatalities all rose until the government started reinstating limits on roads. It mostly left the Autobahn alone. Mostly. Today, speed is regulated
5
on about
years with no
40%
speed
of the
limits?
motorways. Some limits are fixed, others are dynamic, changing according to conditions. On the rest of
Okay.
the freeway, the recommended speed limit is about 80 miles per hour. That means if you get into a crash at a speed above that, you can be held liable for the accident.
I think our fastest speed limit is about 80. And that's usually when you're in the desert of the middle of our country or in the west. If you're in like Arizona or Nevada, if you guys have ever heard of those states, like just east of California, usually the highest speed limits are found there. And I think that the fastest that we have, I could be wrong, but it's about 80. But usually we're at about 70 miles per hour, which I don't have the...
Leave from
Yeah,
Nuremberg
I'm sure we
to
can figure out the math.
Munich. And my mom will drive 100 miles an hour, and it's not a big deal.
It's not that unusual to just travel somewhere at 200 kilometers an hour, which is around 125 miles an hour.
That's
but
fucking
all
crazy.
things considered, on average, I would say it's probably best to imagine Autobahn traffic somewhat like driving through Texas, maybe, or through
Okay.
Kansas. People don't drive slow. It's quite fast all the way around, but it's not recklessly fast. It's not race car fast.
German race car driver Rudolf Caracciola is still believed to hold the record for the fastest speed ever recorded on the Autobahn, 268.8 miles per hour. But others have come quite close, such as a Bugatti Chiron that hit 257 in 2021.
So I have driven a BMW V7. It's an Alpina 600 horsepower sedan. I drove that 170 on the Autobahn. That's the fastest I've driven. It was difficult to do, by the way.
I'd rather not talk about the fastest.
I don't know if I would want to drive that fast. I mean, 15 years ago when I was younger, yeah, for sure. I'd probably be like, let me top out this car and see how fast it goes. Now I'm just, I don't know. I'm a dad. I got 3 kids. I don't want to kill myself. I'm like, I might hit like 120. But I know once I think the fastest I've ever gone was 150 in miles per hour. And I had a Volkswagen GTI. And that was about the top speed that I hit on it on a freeway. If I would have got pulled over for that, I would probably be in jail for like a couple of years. But it was pretty wild. It was just really fast. When you get up in those speeds, it doesn't feel that fast. Like it feels fast. But going from 120 to 150 or like in, kilometers an hour, let's say going from 150 to 220, like the difference doesn't feel as large.
When,
It's
even
wild.
though it's legal to do
You guys
so.
know. I'm sure you
let's
guys
just
have driven
say,
fast.
I once went 4 towns away from us by accident. I didn't want to go that far, but I was just going a little too quickly.
German automakers don't necessarily make their cars specifically for the Autobahn, but the demands of high-speed environments like these highways do influence their engineering decisions and marketing. Mercedes refers to their cars as Autobahn proven.
Driving at high speed is not a video game. It should be relaxed cruising. Yeah? And the big challenge for us is controlling the energy in the car, which increases with the square of speed. And that becomes very important at speeds over about, I would say, 60 miles per hour.
It starts with aerodynamic designs, but axles, suspension systems, springs, dampers, roll bars, the tires, the braking systems are all tuned to perform at this level.
We tune the vehicle safety, the comfort and agility, yes, to deliver a typical Mercedes-Benz driving character at high speeds.
Mercedes even has an onboard system designed to keep the car on course when it is hit from the side by a strong gust of wind.
Even with startling events like, for example, powerful wind gusts. So our aim is to keep the car stable and safely on course at high speed without permanent steering corrections, while damping out bothersome chassis motions. And the car will always support the driver by being tolerant of mistakes.
Also, I'm aware I'm saying all of the car names incorrectly, just so you guys know. I know.
Understand why Germany is basically the only country in the world with a mostly unregulated highway like this? It is probably best to look at what makes Germany's driving laws and car culture so different from, say, the supposedly freedom-loving United States. First of all, it's a lot harder to drive a car in general in Germany. You can't get a license in the country until the age of 18. In the US, the law varies, but in most states, people can obtain learner's permits at 15 and receive licenses allowing them to drive legally under at least some conditions by the age of 16. It is also far more expensive and challenging to obtain a license. Many hours of instruction are required.
My daughter is 3 years away from driving. Where did the time go?
And the tests are demanding.
It's much more difficult, it's more expensive. You know, a lot of people fail their driving tests, myself included.
Fees for a license and all of the associated instruction in Germany can run 2,500 to 3,500 euros when you add up the costs. The fee for a driver's license in the state of California is $45, but that state, as is common in the US, requires driver education classes as well. Then, the certification process for your car in the country is also extremely stringent.
I had to get my 500 euro minivan through it. It was not easy. And that sort of makes the Autobahn feel safer. You know you're surrounded by cars that have been rigorously checked. A lot of cars here in the States, especially in the Rust Belt, would probably not be fit for the Autobahn.
Having such barriers in the US would really limit the number of people and cars who can drive in a country that is right now far more car dependent than Germany is. Americans drive about twice as much as Germans.
Germany is a much more urbanized country. There's lots of people who live in major cities who don't even have a driver's license. They get around using public transit and use rail.
Then there is the cost of this. A lot of engineering goes into keeping these motorways drivable at these speeds. The pavement is extremely smooth and is more or less constantly maintained. That's expensive. The German government spends 5 times more on the Autobahn than it does on its other federal highways.
If you look at the average American freeway or interstate, you will usually just find concrete surfaces. And in Germany, it's way more intricate than that. You can drive through the pouring rain on modern strips of Autobahn that were recently redone, and you don't have any spray whatsoever. You can travel at very high speeds through the pouring rain, and that is no issue at all.
Though the U.S. population is far larger than Germany's, building up a highway system that could realistically handle such high speeds would require much investment. And U.S. infrastructure suffers both criticism and financial insecurity.
Our infrastructure needs a massive overhaul so bad. God, I have no faith that it's going to get done, but they need to do it. It's so
The thing is, Tracy says, Americans might not be missing as much as they think they are.
I have found that the reality is just, it's a little bit anticlimactic in a way. It's just not quite what you want it to be.
Just because there is no speed limit doesn't mean you will always be able to drive fast. Across Germany, there were about 516,000 traffic jams in a single year. And the number of hours Germans spend in traffic has been rising. Several highways had traffic jams that were longer than 40 miles.
It's under construction
That's
a
pretty
lot.
far.
It makes sense. If you have an unrestricted highway, it has to be perfect. You can't have a deep pothole like in Detroit where I used to live. If you had one of those potholes on the Autobahn, you'd see cars getting air.
Germany's Autobahns are also major thoroughfares for international commerce.
Germany is kind of right smack dab in the center there of Europe. It's sort of this connector between East and West, even North and South. So you see a lot of commerce. A lot of trucks are traveling on that Autobahn, and they are not fast.
If you come to Germany and expect a large and vast countryside and you can go wherever as fast as you like, then you might get disappointed because it's quite crowded and we have large cities.
The absence of speed limits on German motorways
that's
divides
kinda everywhere,
even German
though.
opinion. Polls have shown that a slight majority of Germans favor introducing a hard limit on the Autobahn for safety reasons and to help the country hit environmental goals. Speed does worsen the severity of crashes and raises the risks of injuries and deaths. That said, most of Germany's vehicle fatalities happen on rural roads, followed by urban ones. The share of motorway fatalities is also smaller than those in some other OECD countries, such as Slovenia, Luxembourg, and Belgium.
I guess there's studies supporting each side of that argument, but the numbers don't lie. You don't have much differences in fuel consumption, for example. It just doesn't make a whole lot of difference to drive 130 kilometers per hour or keep it open. And you also have to consider the fact that we don't always travel at full speed all the time.
There are also strict rules.
Your gas mileage would probably be absolutely horrible if you're
The
driving
left lane is
super
for
fast all
passing.
the time.
Unlike highways in many other countries, you cannot pass on the right. If someone is behind you in the left lane, you have to move over. Tailgating is a serious offense that comes with heavy fines.
It's also for everybody a high responsibility. So that's why we are not allowed to pass on the right lane. You have to also adapt your speed.
Statistically speaking, Autobahns are safer than other roads, but that mostly has to do with the fact that there's only cars and only trucks. I mean, there are people who literally are afraid to drive on the Autobahn because of the lack of a speed limit.
In like manner, the data on how much introducing a speed limit would reduce carbon pollution has met with skepticism, though some recent numbers suggest it might be more than previously believed.
Anybody who owns an electric car will tell you, when they go fast on the highway, their range plummets. The BMW i3, which was developed right there in Munich. And that car, I can drive it in the city and I'll go 180 miles in the city on a charge. But on the freeway, I'll do 115.
So, in many ways, Americans envious of these German speedways might be missing out on a bit of fun, but it might also be true they are envious of something that is more myth than reality.
I think a lot of Americans probably would travel to Germany, they'd get a fast car, and they'd say, woo-hoo-hoo, let's do it. And then they'd be stuck behind a truck in traffic, and they'd be like, what the heck's going on? It is not a racetrack, but every now and then, the right stretch of the Autobahn and the right time of day and the right car, you can reach automotive nirvana.
Interesting. That was really, really cool. I got some more information that I didn't really know. So, all right. Thanks for that one, you guys. I'm getting out of here. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.